My sisters and brothers, God is not a fan of kidnapping or of abusing the poor. Welcome to Deuteronomy chapter 24. So we're going to be talking today about justice as it applies to kidnapping, and justice as it applies to the poor, the sojourner, the hardworking, and the borrower. All right, let's start with kidnapping. Verse 7 from Deuteronomy chapter 24. If a man is found stealing one of his brothers of the people of Israel, and he treats him like a slave, or enslaves him, or sells him, then that thief shall die. You shall purge the evil from your midst. So if you're wondering here today, as you said, does God care about kidnapping? You have to look no further. So yes, he does. He cares tremendously. So here we see his assessment, God's assessment, as to stealing the liberty of other Israelis. So this is viewed as stealing. And it's the only theft for which the death penalty applies, which is interesting. So of interest, the other theft of things is not punishable by death, but theft of people, of the brethren, is punishable by death. To steal another human, to traffic them, to enslave them is punishable by death. Well, and why is that? Well, there is this great value of human life created by God, and it images him uniquely. And to mess with that process is to come under the most severe wrath as you and your evil are purged from the midst of Israel. Okay, so let's talk about the poor now. Verse 10. When you make your neighbor a loan of any sort, you shall not go into his house and collect this pledge. You shall stand outside, and the man to whom you make the loan shall bring the pledge out to you. And if he is a poor man, you shall not sleep in his pledge, because he's going to pledge his sleeping cloak. So if he's a poor man, you shall not sleep in his pledge. You shall restore to him the pledge as the sun sets, that he may sleep in his cloak and bless you. And it shall be righteousness for you before the Lord your God. So this addresses the tricky subject of loans amongst the people of God. And if you make a loan within the brotherhood, do your best to maintain the dignity of the borrower in the following ways. Well, number one, don't go barging into his house to collect his pledge. Let him bring it out and have the dignity of the borders of his own home. And then if he pledges his cloak, which is this blanket for sleeping in the nighttime desert cold, then the lender is not allowed to sleep in it. In fact, he's commanded to bring the cloak back to the borrower as the sun sets, that the borrower may sleep in the cloak, in the pledge. So now remember, at this moment, the financial loan has not been repaid, but mercy, grace is extended to the lender. And the Bible is full of mercy and undeserved grace, so this shouldn't be a big surprise to us that have read the Bible. Because really the whole thing is about mercy from beginning to end. From the Garden of Eden to the Garden of Gethsemane to the Garden Tomb, the knuckleheads of the Bible, every character, and by extension you and me, do not get what we deserve. So everyone does not want justice. Nobody wants what they deserve. Getting what you deserve is called justice, and no one wants that. Getting less than you deserve is mercy. And then getting way more than you deserve, that's the New Testament, is grace. So only Jesus, 100% innocent, bears the guilt of all who receive his work by faith. So God's eye today is especially on the poor, the borrower, the lender, the imposed upon, the sick, the leprous, and coming up here in a second, the hired worker. It says, don't delay him his wages. So it's mercy towards the fatherless, the widow, and the sojourner. So remember what a sojourner is. It's the person who's living outside of his home country, outside of his home culture. It's the immigrant, the foreigner, the stranger, the alien. So God's eye is on the poor, but also God's eye is on the powerful. So the rich, those with a good harvest, he says, leave some grain for the poor. Leave some olives on the trees after you beat the trees to get the olives off. And leave some grapes on the vine after you harvest. Don't go in there and try to get 100%. Leave some for the poor. So verse 21, when you gather grapes for your vineyard, you should not strip it afterward. It shall be for the sojourner, the fatherless, and the widow. You shall remember that you were a slave in the land of Egypt. Therefore, I command you to do this. And in verse 15, it talks about the worker. It says, you shall give him his wages on the same day, before the sun sets. For he is poor, and he counts on it, lest he cry against you to the Lord, and you be guilty of sin. So don't oppress the poor, don't oppress the needy, lest he cry out to the Lord against you, and then you will be guilty of sin. So you can sin regarding your economic conduct. You could be held liable excuse me, you can be held liable for abusing the power that the haves have over the have-nots. But remember, he says, you came from nothing. You were a slave. You came from slavery. So don't bet your high horse, don't get on your high horse, because it was the Lord who saved you from the horses of Pharaoh, from the Pharaoh's chariots. Okay, so in conclusion, what the Lord is asking for is justice and open-handed dealing with those in your community who are particularly vulnerable and must be handled carefully, honestly, and justly. In fact, we should be conducting our business with them with really generosity as a motivation. Why? Well, the chapter says, it shall be righteousness for you before the Lord. So the idea is God sees all of this. God assesses the motivation, the actions of the rich and the poor. And a generous hand is seen as blameless before God. That's a good thing. And loyal to the community. And it's an asset to the people of God. So we should be treating others as if we are before the Lord. Why? Because we actually are before the Lord. So final question. If you knew that your financial actions were done before the eye of the Lord God, what would have to change? What should change? Think about that today. Pin that on your chest. Thanks for listening.